Let me bring up the video clip so that we can contextualize this, and we're going to bring it into a few things on the subject. You got Tim Pool taking heat for this.
One where he says, what is it? Nothing matters but this. He was at a school event at the wrong team's tent with a knife. He clearly chose murder than to walk away, cut and dry here. Nope, wrong. Imagine you are invited to a party at someone else's house.
I'm going to pause it here because the analogy is not analogous. Tim Pool tweeted out, I'm confused by the story. Are we against self-defense now? This is in the context of the Karmelo Anthony stabbing. And for those of you who I mean, we're going to get more facts as to what the context, the details were, if that will attenuate or exacerbate what happened. The context, as far as we understand it, a track meet where Karmelo, I'm not getting into the racial component of this for now. I'll get into it in a bit when we get to the GiveSendGo fundraiser. Karmelo apparently comes to the track meet with a knife for whatever the reason. There's some sort of dispute under the tent where the victim, whose name escapes me right now, and I feel bad for that, I apologize, tells Karmelo for whatever the reason to get out of it, to leave the tent. Maybe he's from the other school and he's in the tent and he shouldn't be there, or underneath, and the victim says, get out, this is for our school, and whatever. Karmelo says no, and then the victim puts his hands on his shoulder, and Karmelo says, touch me, and you're going to see what happens. And the guy touches him, puts his hand on his shoulder, from what we understand, and Karmelo takes out a knife, stabs him in the chest, and he dies. Tim Pool, I appreciate what he's doing, because some people are going to say there might be some, who threw the first punch? Is it, if someone punches you in the face, do you get to stab them to death? Or even stab them in self-defense, and if they die, legit self-defense. I appreciate the theorizing, the pontificating. Like the German woman who stabbed the man who was sexually assaulting her, and he ends up dying. Everyone on earth is going to say, yeah, you don't prosecute this woman. That's an absolute violation of any form of justice on earth. You look at this case where you're talking about a kid who brings a knife to a track meet for whatever the reason, and until proof to the contrary, there's no meaningful escalation that could possibly warrant such a use of lethal force. And I appreciate Tim Pool not playing devil's advocate, but coming up with a metaphor that's not analogous to say, yeah, you go to someone's house, they threaten you, they're going to cut you up and eat you for dinner, you stab them to death, despite the fact that you were invited, it's in their house, it's lawful self-defense, fine. I don't yet see any evidence in this case that there would be any argument for lawful self-defense, because the self-defense has to be proportionate. I mean, I guess maybe there's some jurisdictions where it doesn't have to be proportionate, but it is a matter of there wasn't even evidence, as far as I know, of the victim throwing a punch, slapping, shoving, whatever, put his hand on his shoulder, the guy thinks he gets to pull out a knife that he brought, stab him in the chest. I'm inclined to say, based on that fact pattern, premeditated, well, not premeditated, but first degree murder, throw the book at him. Although if I'm Pam Bondi and the Attorney General, still, don't say anything, because the process has to play out. And maybe there is attenuating circumstance where the guy put his hand on his shoulder and said, I'm going to strangle you to death right now if you don't leave, and then instantaneous whatever. The second element of controversy in this case is the amount of money that it raised on GiveSendGo. There is a GiveSendGo campaign for this guy, and it raised $270,000. And I'm familiar with Jacob Wells, the CEO, and the flack that the company was taking by some. In that, some are saying, all of a sudden, why would you give this guy a GiveSendGo fundraiser? I don't think the bulk of the flack against GiveSendGo was based on that. I think what people are shocked and outraged about is that they see this as something of a litmus test of a black kid who stabbed a white kid, and that these donations are like a middle finger to white America. That's what I think the outrage really is, not so much that GiveSendGo is allowing this guy to raise finances for his defense. Everybody should be entitled to do that. They shouldn't be deplatformed. And just because you think he's guilty doesn't mean that he might not have defenses. All that to say, I'm not going to dump on Tim Pool either, because I appreciate what he's doing. I just think it's ill-advised to come up with a disanalogous, if that's a word, metaphor that doesn't fit the facts as we currently know them. Bottom line, Robert, what are your thoughts on this from what we know, and whether or not GiveSendGo is culpable for allowing him to raise the funds, and whether or not it's a big, fat, racist middle finger to white America to say we're going to donate to this campaign, much like we're going to support Luigi because we are fundamentally anti-white, and this is our chance to let it show.
Yeah, unless it's fundraising for terrorism like Hamas, the GiveSendGo is absolutely correct to host it. And I agree with the founder of GiveSendGo that you cannot call for them to take that fundraiser down without endangering the ability of GiveSendGo to be a fundraising platform for the legal defense of people who may be falsely accused, like Kyle Rittenhouse. So anybody calling for them to take that down is an idiot and should smack themselves in the face for being stupid. The second aspect in terms of self-defense is I thought there was a rush to judgment kind of on both sides, a little bit of a rush in terms of what Tim Pool concluded, because some of the facts he suggested are contradicted by what the accusations are. But in the same vein, we don't fully and wholly know what the truth is. right? We've only heard the police version of events so far. We have, based on a very preliminary investigation, we have not heard the kids' set of events. And I'll be honest, most of it sounds I'm not super confident that we know. Oh, well, here's what I'm confident of. We don't have the full story. That I know. The idea that he came to somebody else's track meet and he didn't know what that was, and there was no backstory at all between anybody there, and that he just, goes nuts and stabs a guy. I'm sorry, I'm not buying that story. I'm guessing there's a lot more to this story. Now, here's what the law says. It varies by jurisdiction. So the law of self-defense is not uniform. I think there should be certain constitutional minimums under the Second Amendment, and have long advocated that the law of self-defense has a constitutional minimum requirement. The Supreme Court has said so indirectly, but not directly when given the opportunity to do so. I keep affording them the opportunity to do so. Maybe someday they will, in cases I do. To me, constitutionally, you have a right of self-defense. That's what the Second Amendment entitles you to. And it entitles you to a particular means of self-defense, which is to bear arms. But that the right they're trying to defend for you constitutionally is that the state can never take away those rights, nor can anyone else, in my opinion. So there's that aspect. But I think the constitutionally minimum requirement should be that if you fear for your physical safety, and that fear is reasonable, you can use any force in proportion thereto, to the threat. So now in Texas, that basically is Texas law. Some states take that away. Some states expand it. But in Texas, you have to believe that you're at risk of serious bodily injury if you're going to use force can be lethal. That's part one. Mm-hmm. Part two, so one is, did he know the force was lethal when he got out the knife? We don't know the full background of that, right? We don't know exactly what happened, how it happened. We're not, we've got the government's version, but we don't really have his version yet. Of the events. We don't have all the witnesses' testimony of the events. We don't have what the forensic evidence may show concerning the events. I did a hush-hush on whether OJ might actually be innocent. Most people who are absolutely convinced he's guilty have actually never read the whole record in the case. They don't even know what their theory of the evidence is and how kind of laughably absurd it is because they don't understand that. So that's why I say, hesitate to rush to judgment in a murder case like this involving a couple of teenagers who are we're getting just the government's version so far. But what he would need to show, either because there's some backstory. Let me give you an example. I represented Michael Strickland. Michael Strickland was a press reporter in Portland, Oregon. It was called Laughing at Liberals. He kept exposing them and so forth. They didn't like it, the crazy Antifa crowd. So they physically beat the living daylights out of him. After that, he got a gun, he got his license, he learned how to use himself with a gun. And when they were coming at him one day, he pulled the gun and flashed it quickly and then put it away. So a lot of the right was outraged that he was prosecuted. So what that means is, where I agree with Tim Pool is we need to consistently advance self-defense. We need to say, well, we don't like that person. We don't like why they did it. So now let's take away their self-defense. Let's now water down self-defense rules for them. I'm not in favor of that. So the question is, was there context? For example, had this kid ever been assaulted by anybody in that group before? Had they threatened him before? I still believe, now maybe I'm wrong, but my hunch is there's a backstory that hasn't been told yet. I'm not buying he just walked into the wrong tent and just decided to start assaulting people. I'm just not quite buying that story yet. There's reasons to be skeptical of it. But this is what he would need to show self-defense. He would need to show why he had the fear that he was about to suffer serious bodily injury. Because if he had that fear, and that fear was reasonable, then using the knife absolutely is self-defense. Like some people were saying, it's provocative. Here's the other thing. It depends on the jurisdiction. In some jurisdictions, provocation is an exception to the self-defense.
So to say, did he provoke the other guy, the victim, by attending whatever? If there's a dispute as to whether or not it's a private tent, did he provoke him and then use the knife as an excuse to stab him once he said, piss off, whatever, and then the guy shoves him and then he stabs him?
Exactly. So the provocation is when you really instigate the incident. To me, saying, if touch me and see what happens, is not provocation. It's, hey, I'm going to defend myself, so don't do it. And you're at risk if you do. It's an announcement. So I don't see that as provocation at all. I don't see that as gutting his law of self-defense at all, his right of self-defense at all. And so to me, it's only whether or not, now, if in fact the person's use, if there's no backstory at all, and all that is happening is someone's trying to physically remove him from a place he is not lawfully right to be present.
That we call that, at least it's the only trespass laws we have in Canada at the federal level, assault by trespass.
Exactly. In that instance, then, and if the use of force, there's nothing about, if there's no evidence that would make it reasonable for him to think he would suffer serious bodily injury from this individual, then he doesn't have a right of self-defense as a justification, which is what it's legally called, justification, in response to the government's accusations. Remember, in America, it is on the government to disprove self-defense beyond a reasonable doubt. It is not the duty of the defendant to introduce that evidence. It is not on the duty of the defendant to prove their self-defense. It is the obligation of the government to exclude self-defense. And people should be careful. Here's the reality. Here's where cops are often not on your side. A lot of conservatives think back to blue. The cops are with us. Plenty of good cops out there. I know them. I got personal friends on police forces all over the country. So I'm not smearing all cops like sometimes people accuse me of. But as a general rule, cops have not been great at defending people's self-defense rights. All right? Cops have not been great on Second Amendment issues in general. You're going to find lots of sheriffs all across the country that endorse Democrats routinely. And you want to know why? Because they believe in gun control. They think only this is the authoritarian wing of the police force. They will lie also all the time. And then there's clearly underlying racial dynamics here that may be at play. I'll be frank, I think some of the rush on some parts of the right to condemn the kid is because he's black. And now I understand some of it comes from, hey, they're worried that all the anti-white rhetoric is leading kids to do dumb and crazy things, like that kid in Wisconsin who killed his parents in order to try to assassinate Trump because they think that would make him a hero, right? That's these crazy things. So I get that concern, but be careful with that, right? Whenever it's so politically easily aligned for you to distrust or dislike someone and in the process disparage the defense of self-defense, be careful, because maybe that's the path that people with power want you to go down. So I don't know if this kid has a self-defense right. If it turns out the government's current accusations are true, then he doesn't have a self-defense right. If it turns out there's a whole nother part of that story yet to be told, he very well may have a self-defense right. The hunch is on the right that this was racially motivated as anti-white violence. I'm skeptical of that, given all the very unique, distinct facts here. I'm guessing there's a backstory we don't know. And maybe that backstory still implicates him. Still, maybe that's why we haven't heard it yet. Maybe there's negative information about him in that backstory. Or maybe the backstory gives him a defense. But I would wait till we get the backstory to condemn the kid. And I definitely wouldn't rush to eviscerate the law of self-defense just because you don't like the person who may use it for his benefit.